So most of you probably have a bank account, hopefully with a good amount of money in it. Mine doesn't, but that's okay. Later. So now what happens if suddenly you can't get access to that money for a week, for a month, for a quarter? When a bank goes bankrupt, you might never get that money back. Currently in the US, there are regulations that protect depositors so that you're able to get up to $500,000 back per account. But when a bank goes bankrupt, that process between when the bank goes bankrupt and when you get that money back can take months, if not even years. As a corporation, banks are responsible for making profits for their shareholders. Government regulations are what keeps banks from taking excess risks that may disrupt the financial system. Bank regulation should be increased to give government more control over the financial system by increasing clarity and limiting bank activities. Current bank regulation is weak, as banks are able to engage in risky behavior, as seen in the last financial crisis. One way banks make money is by taking deposits and paying a low interest rate on those deposits while lending that money out at a higher interest rate. The larger they are and the more money they lend out, the more risk they take on from the possibility of people not paying back the loans that they take out. This increases the risk that the banks won't be able to pay back the depositors and pay back their loans. But it also increases their potential profits. So, for example, if I deposit $100 in the bank and I get a 1% interest rate on my money, and then Chris here borrows $50 and at an interest rate of 4%, the bank will make a $1 profit at the end. But the bank doesn't want to just pay me 1%, lend out, that's supposed to be $40. I apologize, that's supposed to be $40. Lend out $40 and make a profit of $1. The bank would rather lend out the full $100 at a higher interest rate, say 10%, and make $9 profit, as opposed to a $1 profit. This setup works, assuming that I don't ask for my money back, and Chris pays the bank back $110. The profits that can be made by increasing the amount, the bank increasing the amount that they lend out, can be staggering, which explains why they want to lend out as much money as they can. So the problem comes up when Chris doesn't pay back his $100 loan. Then the bank loses $100 on my $100 deposit and can't pay me back on my deposit. So regulations, such as the reserve requirement and interest on excess reserves, attempt to limit the amount that banks will lend out of their deposits. The current reserve requirement of up to 10% for large banks, as listed on the table in the Financial Reserve, means that banks are required by law to lend out no more than 90% of their deposits. This is still a risky situation, as if Chris is borrowing $90 and is unable to pay back a $90 loan, then I am still unable to get back the vast majority of my deposit.
Later, guys.
This situation results in bank failure and ends with the government having to step in by insuring deposits and in some cases bailing out the banks. Risky behavior in the banking industry leads to crises and bailouts that are especially harmful to the average citizen. We aren't able to access our money when we need it the most. It costs us money to bail out these banks. But most of all, it leads to disruptive cycles in the real economy that can stunt professional and personal growth and development. The loss of jobs and the stagnation of the unemployed is the worst impact that recessions and depressions have. Many people drop out of the economic system. The loss of hope that many experience can impact the rest of their lives, and some never have the opportunity to recover. If regulation is not tightened, then uncontrolled financial crises will continue, and we will continue to suffer the consequences. If regulation is tightened, and government regulators have more control over the financial system, then the increased clarity and risk reduction will reduce the risk of harm to us as citizens. We must continue to demand for increased regulations in the financial industry, not deregulation. We must demand for more clarity and more consideration in the lending process. And we must demand that our voices be heard, as we are the most affected. Thank you.